colleagues would come to me and we would together ask ourselves what is in store for us on this particular holiday.
Dr. Grueber, you know the accused.
Ich kenne ihn mit dem Namen und habe ihn früher gekannt, aber wenn ich ihn jetzt rekognoszieren sollte, dann würde mir das nicht möglich sein.
Answer, I know him by name, I knew him in the past, but if I had to identify him now, it would have been difficult for me.
When did you see, in what period did you see Adolf Eichmann for the last time?
Adolf Eichmann zum ersten Male.
Ich bitte um Entschuldigung, wenn ich trotz meines Eides etwas allgemein rede, denn Sie müssen bedenken, Hohes Gericht, das sind 20 Jahre her und dann hat sich manches in der Erinnerung verschoben. Ich kann genau den Tag nicht mehr sagen, es war aber bald nach der Einrichtung des Amtes in der Kurfürstenstraße. Das heißt, ich war einmal im Hotel Metropol, war das wohl in Wien, wenn ich das Namen vom Hotel richtig in Erinnerung habe. Aber da war ich nur im Amt und habe eine untergeordnete Instanz getroffen. Es handelte sich darum, ein Altersheim, das einer schwedisch-jüdischen Gemeinde gehörte, frei zu bekommen, außerhalb von Wien. Aber da habe ich mit dem Angeklagten selbst keinen Kontakt gehabt, ich war nur in der Dienststelle.
The witness. I beg to apologize if I do not recollect quite clearly. You will excuse me. This was 20 years ago, and therefore I don't remember the exact date. But this was, I believe, shortly after the Kurfürstenstraße office was established. Later on, I was at the Metropol Hotel. This is a Metropol Hotel in Vienna. But there I was only in Eichmann's office. I didn't speak to him. I was in a lower office then, and I had no opportunity of meeting him. Then we were speaking about the releasing of the House of Aged, who belonged to Swedish Jews, and he was outside Vienna. I didn't speak to him, but I spoke to a minor official in his office on this occasion. You met him in Berlin, didn't you? Yes.
In his office at Kurfürstenstraße 116?
Yes, I did.
Question. Try to remember. In 1939, just before the war and then after the war broke out, what were the subjects brought up when you visited Eichmann's office?
Ich bin sehr oft da gewesen und habe alle Fragen, die uns bewegten, vorgetragen. Fragen der Auswanderung, Fragen der Behandlung der Juden und alles, was uns bewegte, habe ich in dem Büro vorgetragen, die, soweit nicht andere Instanzen dafür in Frage kamen.
I was there at the office quite frequently. We were dealing with all kinds of questions, professional questions, questions relating to immigration, or any other question with regard to Jews, which were not dealt with by other departments.
You discussed personal as well as more collective questions when you visited Eichmann's office?
Alles, was mir als Not begegnete, vorgetragen. Nicht nur Einzelfälle, sondern auch generelle Fälle.
What I saw jeopardized, I was trying to save not only individual cases, but also more general cases.
The question was, what attitude on part of Eichmann did you encounter?
Ja, ich habe von ihm den Eindruck gehabt und bitte den Angeklagten, das mir nicht übel zu nehmen, wenn ich es offen sage, ich bin ohne Hass und Rachegefühl hierher gekommen, aber ich habe von ihm den Eindruck gehabt, eines Mannes, der da sitzt wie ein Eisblock und wie ein Marmorblock, und alles, was man versucht heranzubringen, das prallt ab. Und andererseits hatte ich auch, und das war nicht nur meine Meinung, denn Sie müssen wissen, dass in den Kreisen der Berliner Juden und auch derer, die sich mit dem schweren Schicksal befassten, der Name ein Symbol geworden war, ein trauriges Symbol. Es ist so etwas, was wir damals nannten, der Landsknechtstyp. Wir unterscheiden zwischen Soldaten und Landsknechten. Der Landsknecht ist der mit seiner Uniform, die er anzieht, das Gewissen und den Verstand ablegt. Und das war so der Eindruck, den wir damals, nicht nur ich, sondern auch meine Mitarbeiter und Freunde hatten.
Well, as a matter of fact, he made on me an impression. I hope the accused will not take it amiss if I say so. I didn't come here out of hatred or guided by feelings of vengeance, but he made an impression of me of a block of ice or a block of marble who was not feeling anything human at all, and he would thwart everybody's attempt to arrange things. This was not my personal feeling, but this was the feeling of all the Jews of Berlin, and the name of Eichmann became a symbol, a sad symbol. He was a Landsknecht, as it were, in our eyes. There is a difference between...
Judge Landau.
I have to
is correcting a point of the translation.
Leave the word Landsknecht, says the presiding judge to the Hebrew interpreter. Let's leave the word Landsknecht as it is. There is a difference between a Landsknecht and a soldier. A Landsknecht, the moment he puts on his uniform, becomes oblivious to the call of justice and to his own conscience. This was the opinion of all those who were working with me. This was the opinion of all my friends at that time.
Question. Were you successful here and there? Or, let's say, were you generally successful in the tasks which brought you to Eichmann's office?
Ihre Aufgaben, die Sie vor Eichmann brachten, durchzusetzen.
Es war, soweit ich in der Erinnerung habe, so, dass ich entweder ein Nein hörte oder dass mir gesagt wurde, Sie bekommen Antwort, kommen Sie wieder. Aber ich habe nicht in der Erinnerung, dass ich einmal eine Entscheidung bekommen habe mit einem Ja. Also nicht einmal, ich habe keine in der Erinnerung, wo ich mit einem positiven Entscheid aus dem Zimmer herausgegangen bin. Meistens war es ein Nein oder aber die Antwort, Sie müssen warten, Sie bekommen Antwort.
As far as my recollection goes, I would always leave his office with a definite no on his part, or sometimes he would put me off saying that I should wait for a decision, but I do not recollect a yes on his part. Never did I leave his office with a positive answer whatsoever. It was either a no or some sort of non-committal answer and an injunction on his part for me to wait.
Dr. Grueber, question. Dr. Grueber, do you remember whether the accused in those meetings ever referred to orders from above which he had received or was about to receive?
Der Angeklagte sich jemals auf Weisungen seiner Vorgesetzten berief, die einholen oder bekommen muss?
Wenn ich in der Erinnerung es recht behalten habe, dann war es so, dass alles in der Ich-Form geschah, also ich verordne, ich sage Ihnen und ich kann nicht. Also ob nun das ein Ausdruck war, seine Persönlichkeit, entschuldigen Sie, etwas hochzusteigern, oder ob er auch nur, ob er wirklich den Eindruck nicht nur erwecken wollte, oder ob es tatsächlich so war, dass er die allein entscheidende Instanz war. Ich wüsste nicht einen Fall, wo er gesagt haben sollte, ich muss mit einer höheren Instanz Rücksprache nehmen. Also der ist mir kein Fall in der Erinnerung.
As far as I recall, the encounters with the accused, he would always answer me in the first person. He would always use the word I, or abuse the word I. He would say, I can't, I shall, I will, I shall order. I don't know whether he used the first person in order to raise his own prestige, or whether indeed he was the decisive authority. But I do not recall that he would ever say that I have to speak with my superiors, that I have to approach a higher authority. This I do not recollect at all.
Question.
There were settlements of the Templars in Haifa and in Sharon, and their anti-Semitism was prevailing. This is how we trying to seek explanation for the reasons for the accused anti-Semitism. After all, we are trying to understand people, particularly the people we are dealing with. And as we came into contact with this man, we didn't find any trace of understanding. He was absolutely impervious to feeling, without any exception whatsoever. We spoke about various things regarding Jews, and we didn't know where was the basis of the accused anti-Semitism and his rabid hatred, which was absolutely boundless, and we couldn't possibly understand it. And afterwards, when I was for a long time in a concentration camp, only then did I understand that boundless hatred which I saw, hatred against Jews which I saw there.
Go into details and to explain.
Wie ein Mensch nun so in dem Hass sich verfangen haben konnte und sich in dem Hass immer mehr steigerte. Ich habe das später versucht mir zu erklären. Ich darf so sagen, in unserer Schrift gibt es ein Wort, wer da hat, dem wird gegeben, wer da nicht hat, dem wird noch genommen, was er hat. Und wenn man einmal im Gefälle dieser Dämonie drin ist, dann wird sie immer stärker und bekommt den Menschen immer mehr in die Gewalt. Und diese Erfahrung habe ich später auch gerade im Lager machen müssen. Ich sehe die Dinge heute anders an als damals, wo das ganze, der Angeklagte Eichmann und all die anderen Männer mir ein psychologisches Problem waren. Ich bin ja auch der Meinung, dass gelegentliche freundliche Stimmungen und vielleicht freundliche Stunden an diesem Gefälle nichts ändern. Es kann einer nicht immer auf Hochtouren des Sadismus laufen. Ich habe es mal in einer Zeitschrift so ausgedrückt, es ist nur etwas, was die Deutschen verstehen. Jeder Wüstling hat Wohlfahrtsoasen. Jeder Mensch hat einmal Stimmungen und Stunden, wo er etwas aufgeschlossener ist, die aber nichts bedeuten für die Gesamthaltung und für das Gefälle, in dem dieser Mensch sich befindet. Und gerade wenn ich die Entwicklung sehe, auch in die letzten Jahre hinein, dann sehe ich, wie gerade diese Dämonien immer stärker anwachsen und die Menschen versklaven.
This was a problem for us to understand how a human being could possibly fence himself in boundless hatred, and how this hatred could be soaring ever more and ever. We couldn't find any explanation of this particular phenomenon. Now I understand these things differently. There is a maxim in our sacred books saying, what one has one increases, and if one has little, the little is being taken away from us, from a man. This is perhaps how one could understand this demonic hatred which was ever soaring. I saw it later on with my own eyes in the concentration camp. Now I see it quite differently. At that time we couldn't understand how a human being, how Eichmann and his ilk could possibly behave the way they did. We saw in them a psychological problem, because after all it is quite impossible that one could perpetrate crimes with so much sadism, so much cruelty. Today, however, I found an explanation already. I even wrote about it in one of my treatises on the problem. I wrote about the demonic haters who occasionally, however, get...
Attorney General, the pun of Wüste. This is a pun in the German, which is difficult to translate. Sometimes even a hooligan has his good moments, goes the saying.
In the last years of the war, we could see the satanic hatred which was materializing itself in an ever-increasingly hideous and heinous form.
Your Honor, Germans, Poles, Dutchmen, who were all did not find pleasure in the eyes of the SS.
How did they treat you in Sachsenhausen?
Hohes Gericht, ich bitte, dass ich über meine Leiden in Sachsenhausen nicht zu sprechen brauche. Ich habe ausgeschlagene Zähne, ich habe einen Herzfehler, aber ich kann nur sagen, dass das, was ich gelitten habe, ein kleines war im Vergleich zu dem, was meine jüdischen Freunde litten. Und das Mitleiden mit meinen Kameraden ist für mich immer bitterer gewesen als das eigene Leiden. Herzenswunden bluten immer mehr als blutende Lippen. Man hat mir die Zähne ausgeschlagen, aber das war nicht das Schlimme. Ich darf vielleicht darüber reden, was meine jüdischen Kameraden da gelitten haben.
Honorable Court, may I be permitted not to go into detail about my sufferings at the Sachsenhausen camp. My teeth were beaten out. I have a heart disease, but all these are only the small of the smallest suffering compared to the sufferings of my Jewish friends. It is always more difficult to watch and see the sufferings of your friends rather than one's own suffering. The wounds of the heart are serious and more serious than the wounds of the lips. May I be permitted to speak of the sufferings of my Jewish comrades?
Dantes Inferno, da konnten die Menschen noch weinen und klagen. Millionen sind umgekommen, die nicht weinen und klagen konnten, die mehr erlebten als Dantes Inferno.
Here we speak about the suffering and the inferno. We heard about it from the press, but it is absolutely impossible to imagine what happened, because there was cruelty where there were no witnesses, where there were no documents proving the case. There were no witnesses to what happened weren't in the bunkers, no witnesses to instances where people were buried alive. Perhaps they will speak in their final judgment, but here the voice can no longer be heard. In the Dante Inferno, there was, of course, hell, but in this hell one could still complain or weep. Here there was a hell where nobody could complain, nobody could weep. This was a hell much more hideous and terrible.
When did you leave Sachsenhausen?
Im Oktober 1941.
In October 1941.
Where were you taken to?
Dachau.
From there I was sent to Dachau.
You stayed in Dachau up to?
Bis zu meiner Entlassung am 23. Juni 1943.
Up to my release on the 23rd of July 1943.
Belonging to this congregation is personal and is all over Berlin.
Thank you. Judge Landau. Dr. Servatius, have you any questions of the witness? Dr. Servatius, yes, I have a few questions.
Herr Zeuge, Sie sagten, dass Sie wiederholt bei Eichmann auf dem Büro waren, um mit ihm zu verhandeln. Was haben Sie ihm vorgetragen?
Ich habe ihm alle die...
Mr. Witness, you say you applied several times to Eichmann's office and went there. What were these matters that you took up?
Alles das vorgetragen, was an Not vor uns stand. Auswanderungsfragen, persönliche Sicherheit und all die Fragen, die nun durch die Judengesetze akut geworden waren.
I brought before him all the matters which needed attention, questions of emigration, of personal security, and all matters which were brought to the fore by the special legislation against Jews.
Wenn ich richtig verstanden habe, sagten Sie, seine Antworten waren entweder Nein oder Sie müssen warten, in einigen Tagen. Führen Sie diese Antwort, Sie müssen warten, darauf zurück, dass seine Vorgesetzten fragen wollte?
If I understood you correctly, he would always reply either no, or he would say you must wait for an answer for some time. Could you say that when he gave you that second kind of reply that you would have to wait, was the reason for that that he had to consult his superiors?
Ich habe in den Verhandlungen den Eindruck gehabt, dass der Angeklagte nun nur auf die Weisung seiner Vorgesetzten angewiesen war. Ich habe mir auch nie Gedanken darüber gemacht, ob er nun in dem besonderen Falle bei seiner vorgesetzten Stelle vielleicht eine Rückfrage hielt. Ich habe aus der ganzen Haltung des Angeklagten immer nur den Eindruck gehabt, dass er wenigstens als der Verantwortliche in die Erscheinung treten wollte. Ob er der Verantwortliche war, konnte ich ja nicht feststellen.
Sie sagten, der Angeklagte...
I was always under the impression that the man does not consult his superiors. It never occurred to me that he is waiting for a reply from his superiors. My impression was that he was the man to decide. I do not know if this was only the impression he tried to make out, but this was the impression I had.
Hätte in der Ich-Form gesprochen.
Ja.
Wäre ein Land.
Expressed my mission and my feelings as a priest and used words and tried to explain.
Zunächst meine Frage dahin beantwortet, dass Sie ihm keine Vorhaltungen gemacht hätten, sondern Ihre Taten hätten sprechen lassen.
Mr. Witness, you have replied to my question to that extent that you made it clear that you did not preach to the accused. You did not say anything. You expected him to be influenced by your personal example.
Dass die Worte abprallen, wie bei einem Pudel das Wasser, da macht man nicht den Versuch, im Gegenteil, man hat ja die Sorge, dass man noch die Kluft zwischen den Menschen größer macht. Ich darf aber jetzt eine Sache erzählen, die ich nicht gerne erzählt hätte, aus einer persönlichen Begegnung mit dem Angeklagten.
When one feels that there is no approach and no way of penetrating to the head of a man, that words would not penetrate like water on a poodle who does not get wet, but the water rolls off right and left, then one says nothing and only fears that the gap will grow. But may I be permitted to relate something which I am always reluctant
Judge Landau, what you wish to relate now, does this belong to the
Yes,
question
sir.
which you were asked?
Ich habe ihm eine Frage beantwortet.
Ja. Herr
Mr.
Zeuge,
Sabatsius, you wish to reply to my question?
Herr Zeuge, Augenblick. Sie müssen auf meine Frage antworten.
Jawohl.
Und Sie sind gefragt worden, ob Sie ihm Vorhaltungen gemacht haben.
Dr. Sabatsius, you must reply to my question. I asked whether you had preached to this man, and you first of all said no.
President
Judge
of court.
Landau,
I did not hear an answer in the negative. I did not hear a no, but the answer was that deeds should have meant something to the accused.
Der Zeuge hatte zunächst gesagt, dass er nichts gesagt hätte, sondern seine Taten hätten stimmt. Hat dann nachher aber am Schluss angehängt, es wären doch einige Äußerungen gefallen. Wenn er jetzt diese Dinge erzählen will, in einer kurzen Form, habe ich nichts dagegen.
Dr. Sabatsius, the witness at first said that he expected his own deeds to influence the accused, but he then added that there were from time to time, there were some remarks made. If he wants to relate this, I have no objection.
Braucht man ja nicht nur in der Befehlsform zu machen. Das ist ein schlechter Seelsorger, der nur im Imperativ spricht. Ich kam eines Abends sehr abgekämpft in die Kurfürstenstraße und da hatte ich den Eindruck, dass der Angeklagte, nun darf ich mal sagen, einen guten Tag hatte. Vielleicht hatte er auch etwas Mitleid mit mir. Ich weiß nicht, ob der Angeklagte sich dieser Situation entsinnt. Er sagte, sagen Sie mal, was kümmern Sie überhaupt um die Juden? Sie werden keinen Dank für diese Arbeit haben.
Preachings must not be heard always in the imperative. A preacher is not good if he always uses the imperative mood. And I want to relate to the court. I once arrived tired to the office in Kurfürstenstrasse and had the impression that the accused had a good day and a day of goodwill, perhaps. Maybe he sympathized with me and said, "Why all this activity on your part? No one will thank you for your doings, for your activities for the benefit of the Jews. There will be no thanks coming from them."
Weil ich glaubte, er hätte nun als ehemaliger Templer dieses Land gekannt, sagt, Sie kennen die Straße, die von Jerusalem nach Jericho führt. Er nickte. Dann sagt er, auf dieser Straße lag einmal ein Jude, der unter die Räuber gefallen war. Da kam einer vorbei, der kein Jude war und hat geholfen. Und der Herr, auf den ich allein höre, der sagt mir, gehe du hin und tue desgleichen. Das ist meine Antwort.
Diese Antwort genügt mir. Ich habe eine weitere Frage.
I answered him because I believed that this is a man belonging to the Templars order and as such knows Palestine. I said, do you know the road leading from Jerusalem to Jericho? And he nodded. I said, on this road there was once a Jew brought down by robbers. And he who helped that Jew was a man who was not a Jew. The God whom I worship, he told me, go and do as he did. This is what I told the accused.
Bauern und Gutsbesitzer, die zu Hunderten dort die Menschen noch versteckt haben unter Lebensgefahr. Auch der Mann hat es erkannt, dass in der Arbeiterschaft der meiste Wille war, zu helfen, weil diese Leute nicht diese Hemmungen hatten, die sehr oft bei Akademikern vorlagen.
In the November action, we already saw and witnessed this. At the time already, we saw the reactions of the people of Eastern Berlin. I was at the time a priest in a community, mostly workers, in the east of Berlin. And immediately when the pogrom started, the word got round by this verbal broadcast, Jewish verbal broadcast as we called it at the time, that in Karlsdorf there is a priest where one can find shelter, and people came to hide, not in tens but in hundreds. I mobilized my children, the elders of my church, and with their help sent the people to the villagers, to those living in the suburbs. Not one door was locked in their face. All doors opened to the Jews who were asking for shelter. When my friend Leo Beck, when he arrived in the United States, when he was asked, where would you go if you were to go back to Germany? And I must say, I have no prejudice against American Jews, but to a certain extent they were far and detached from the goings-on in Germany. And he said, first and foremost, I would go to those to whom I owe gratitude and express my gratitude. First to the laborers in the north and east of Berlin, to the priests of the believing church, and he mentioned names, and then to farmers and farm owners and those who had villas out of town and gave shelter to hundreds of Jews. In these layers of the people, the feeling was felt that at times was missing amongst the academicians and other intellectuals.
Judge Halevi, Dr.
Des Pius des 11. gehabt, der auch mich empfangen wollte im September 39. Dann kam aber der Krieg dazwischen, weil wir gemeinsam katholisch und evangelisch ein großes Siedlungsprojekt in Brasilien hatten, wo wir die Hilfe der katholischen Kirche in Brasilien brauchten.
We did everything together, all we undertook. We believed, we planned together, not only to, not in one case, both cardinals who were devoted and ready to act, were especially concerned with matters of the church. I was free to do other things, and therefore took care of any job that came my way, especially immigration. And if I may say so, today we also had the help of Pope Pius XI, who was about to receive me for an audition in September '39, but the war broke out. We needed the help and assistance of the Catholics in the Catholic Church, and our plan was for emigration and settlement in Brazil, which at the time was being prepared.
Did the Pope intervene?
Bei denen, die nun offizielle Stellungen hatten, das galt selbst von den Botschaftern und Gesandten, die in Berlin akkreditiert waren, so wenig Verständnis für diese Fragen fanden, dass wir nicht nur traurig, sondern sehr oft wütend und erbost waren.
To my regret, the readiness was very small and limited in all countries, not only Switzerland, to receive and let in Jewish immigrants. Other countries closed their gates, and so it happened in Switzerland. There were also difficulties in regard to the transportation itself. The Swiss were not more ready than other countries in Europe to accept Jews. I remember when I spoke to a high-ranking officer, also a Christian in Switzerland, after the November '38 pogrom, when the number of the suicides and those who sought death increased. I told him, all these who choose death now, you and I will be asked to account for them on the day of reckoning. All the official places, all official institutions, embassies, they did not reveal any understanding or interest in the lot and fate of these Jews. Very often we came out of those places full of anger, not only full of shame at the lack of readiness to help.
You spoke about the...
Auch an alle, auch an den Angeklagten, dass wir dafür sorgen, dass vergebene Liebe und vergebene Schuld sie vor Gottes Thron treffen. Ich danke.
Wir danken Ihnen, Dr. Grueber. Damit ist Ihre Zeugenaussage beendet.
Thank you, Dr. Grueber. Your testimony is finished. I beg that this very honorable court permit me at this hour to say a personal word. When I appear as the first German before this court, and I found it difficult to come and appear before this court, a word about my inner excitement. I shall apologize if I did appear perhaps in a way or by way of attack or excitement. I hope that what was said and done here, that this procedure will contribute its contribution not only to the understanding between Israel and Germany, but will help humanity. And to my friends in Israel here, may I say what was said in the scriptures by Ephraim, and the things were translated by Luther into the German. God has granted me to live and grow in the country of my labor. I too express a regret regarding this testimony and confession, and I hope that this people will live to see that they will be permitted to live in their country of their work and labor. On the day of the independence, I have said that when there is forgiving love, the sin is forgiven. Forgiving love here and the sin forgiven there. I beg to be understood if I say this a little strictly and have spoken out here openly. I hope that this love and this forgiveness will encompass everybody everywhere, including the accused, that there will be loving forgiveness before the throne of God. Mr. Baror.
Judge Landau, please place your right hand on the Bible and say after me. My testimony in this trial will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. What is your full name?
Charlotte Salzberger. My previous name was Vreshner, Vreshner.
Judge Landau, please reply to Mr. Baror's questions. If you wish, you may remain seated. Mrs. Salzberger, you were born in Germany. Then in 1934 you went to Holland.
With my parents, 2 brothers, and a younger sister.
Judge Landau, please raise your voice a little bit and get as close as you can to the microphone, please.
I came to Holland with my parents, 2 married brothers, and a sister younger than myself.
What was your mother's name, the first name of your mother? Mr. Baror, you stayed in Holland from 1934 until when?
In Holland until January 44.
In Holland, did you have to register as Jews after the Nazi invasion of Holland?
Yes.
How was this carried out?
There was a law that every person who had at least 2 Jewish ancestors had to register and thus be classified as Jew.
Mrs. Salzberger, I asked you to bring with you an album where you had collected documents from the time of the Holocaust and kept them to this day. Would you please show me out of this album whether you have one of these registration blanks for Jews from Holland?
I have it.
Is that the form from February 1941?
Yes, the 6th of February 41.
Judge Landau, would you please show it to the witness so she can certify that this is the document?
Yes, it is.
Mr. Baror. Rather, Judge Landau, this is T694, the number of the exhibit. Mr. Baror now. Were you obligated in that year to wear the Jewish star?
Yes.
Is it included here in this file? There are 3 photographs here. I would like you to identify the top photographs. Top photograph. And it says here the letter, it says here Yod, J-O-O-D, doesn't it?
Understand what the intention was. Four weeks later,
was that?
early in March 45, I believe the 3rd of March 45, after a month's stay, the policeman told us that we were to be taken to the Dienststelle. This was the name of the commanding office in Theresienstadt. And there we would be interviewed by important SS personalities, including the accused. He mentioned Eichmann, yes.
What happened?
When we arrived at the office, the Dienststelle, we were separated, the 5 of us, and there was a separate interview with each one of us.
Now, please tell the court about the interview which you had.
First, there were 4 high-ranking officers, SS officers.
Do you remember their names?
Ram. He was the commander of Theresienstadt camp.
Did you see him later?
I saw him before and I saw him later. And then the accused, Ginter and Mös. M-O-E-S, Mös. At this interview,
who took the active part in the interview? Who conducted it?
The accused, he spoke a lot, he did a lot of speaking, and we identified him from his way of speech.
How was that? When you say we,
later
whom did you mean?
Changed impressions. The contents of the interview was the same regarding myself and my sister.
Now, you said one could have identified the accused by his manner of speech. What do you mean by that?
Yes, we knew who was Eichmann in Holland. He was notorious for using Jewish expressions, and there was a story that he knows Hebrew perfectly, that he was born in Palestine, and one could trace it in his way of speech. He took interest in our past, the background in Holland. He asked questions about synagogues, about Zionist matters. We also had the certificate of entry to Palestine, about belonging to youth movements, Zionist movements, but the main purpose of this interview was to find out what we knew about extermination camps, if we saw people in Ravensbrück who were taken to Auschwitz and who came from Theresienstadt.
Now, how did you conduct yourself when you spoke about Ravensbrück?
We understood the purpose of this interview, and we understood why we were held in solitude, because they feared that we know too much and would be telling about it to the people in Theresienstadt. We said that in Ravensbrück we worked for the Siemens factory in a separate camp, had no contact with the people who arrived at Ravensbrück from other camps, and gave very qualified answers. But we did not say that Ravensbrück was a good camp because it was notorious. Also, the question of my mother, and
he asked about your mother? He had her papers? The accused had her papers?
I cannot remember.
Did he have a file?
Of course, he had a file.
And he asked about her?
Yes.
He did not know of her death?
It seems that he did not know.
Did you speak about her death?
Yes.
What was at the end?
The interview was held in very pleasant language, and the attitude was quite kind and respectful.
The accused also addressed in the third person and was polite.
He expressed his regret at my mother's death, but the interview itself had a very less kind meaning. We were told that we would be given the privilege to enter the Theresienstadt ghetto, or the jüdische Deutschverwaltung Theresienstadt, but if we would speak of our experiences in Ravensbrück, he used an expression.
He said, then you will go through the chimney. Is that what he said?
You will put through the chimneys. This was the expression he used. On the following morning, we were put into the ghetto in Theresienstadt.
Now, this Central Evidence Certificate, as it was called, from the 8th of March 1945, bearing your sister's name, do you have that with you?
Yes.
Did you receive such a card from the administration, the Jewish administration of the ghetto?
Yes. This was the registration office run
The
by...
Jewish administration ran that.
Yes.
Did you eventually also get a labor card?
Yes.
Can you see your labor pass here bearing your name?
Yes.
Judge Landau, Exhibit T703. The certificate from the registration office. Mr. Bar-Or, that also was issued by the Jewish administration of the ghetto, right? Judge Landau, the labor pass will be Exhibit T704. Mr. Bar-Or, will you please show us the labor card, your labor card?
Yes.
What types of labor were you engaged in these months?
I was a waitress first month.
That was quite an easy type
Any
of work.
work connected with food was considered as a specially good job.
Now, have you got any explanation why you were employed in such a privileged position?
It seems, I don't know if this was an instruction, but when we arrived at the Theresienstadt camp, the attitude was in our favor, and it must be pointed out that it never happened that anyone from another camp was brought to Theresienstadt. It was unusual, especially from a concentration camp. And when we arrived, we aroused a certain sympathy. There were people there from Holland whom we knew and met them once again.
Tell me, please, did you promise the accused that you would not tell anything about what you knew of Ravensbrück?
Yes.
And did you keep that obligation?
But we related everything immediately.
To whom? And
We
how?
told about our experiences to those responsible people, and also to acquaintances, to our Dutch acquaintances. There were intellectuals amongst them, intelligent people. The intellectuals from Holland were brought to Theresienstadt.
Mrs. Salzberger, what was the reaction of the people when they heard your stories about Auschwitz, about the death campaign in the East and all that? How did people react in Theresienstadt?
They did not believe us. In March 45 said that we were not sane. They did not believe our words. There was a transport from Theresienstadt to Auschwitz in 44, and we knew from people we met at Ravensbrück who came from Auschwitz, from Theresienstadt via Auschwitz. We know they volunteered to join those transports as late as 44 to join their husbands and so on. And when we told them about all that happened, they would not believe us.
Mr. Bar-Or, could you please identify the savings booklet which you were issued in certificate number 75788, bearing your name? Judge Landau, Mr. Bar-Or, what is the situation? Have you many more questions? The time is late, you know. Mr. Bar-Or, I would like to finish with the direct examination. Judge Landau, this was just for information. Mr. Bar-Or, I am about to conclude. Judge Landau, I am not trying to accelerate matters here. If you wish to conclude, well and good. Mr. Bar-Or, yes, the witness is from Jerusalem. She could come tomorrow, but I would like to conclude now. Now the savings card will be marked Exhibit T705. Mr. Bar-Or, did you obtain a Theresienstadt local currency?
Yes, we had a monthly salary.
In Theresienstadt money. And did you keep one of these banknotes?
Yes.
Could you identify this 100 crown banknote? This is for 5 crowns, this piece of paper here? Judge Landau, the 100 crown piece will be Exhibit T706. Mr. Bar-Or, this is 10 crowns. Judge Landau, sir, do you wish to deposit all of that money with the court? Mr. Bar-Or, I shall content myself with that. Judge Landau, now we have 10 crowns. That will be Exhibit T707. Judge Landau, and the 5 crown piece will be Exhibit T708.
May I add something in regard to this money? The money was worthless. One could get nothing with this money. This was only outwardly we discovered that this really had no meaning. There was a bank issuing money and issuing a deposit book. Salaries were noted in that book, but this was all on paper and had no value at all.
Mr. Bar-Or, Madam, 2 more questions. In April 1945, you heard about the organization of a second transport? You heard about the transport to Switzerland?
Yes.
It was before you came?
Yes.
And then there was a second one. There began an organization of a second transport allegedly to Switzerland. When did you hear about it?
In April, yes.
Was it easy to join the transport?
No, it was very difficult.
Did everyone want to go?
Everybody wanted to join and to be included. The number of places was limited.
How many places were reserved?
600 exactly.
And this was designed for 300?
This was intended for 300 exactly.
Your sister and you managed to join the transport?
Yes, we were numbers 299 and number 300, the very last.
Do you see the notices from the 23rd of April 1945 asking you to prepare for this transport? Can you identify the photostats? Judge Landau, these are exhibits T709 and T710. Mr. Bar-Or, who organized these transports?
The Dienststelle organized
What
this
is the
transport.
Dienststelle?
The SS at Theresienstadt.
They organized it, the SS. And what was the destination, as you were told then?
The destination was Switzerland, as we were told.
What happened eventually to this transport, Mrs. Salzberger?
This transport never left Theresienstadt. And the reason was the intervention of the Red Cross. During that week, a few days before this transport was supposed to leave, into the ghetto came the Red Cross representatives, Dunant, and he drew a lot of attention because he ran about in a white car. There were rumors that negotiations were being conducted between the SS and the International Red Cross for the handing over of the ghetto from the SS to the Red Cross. This negotiation was concluded a week or 10 days later, and the ghetto was really transferred to the Red Cross authorities. In exchange, all SS men could leave, and they were getting ready for that step for a long time. Secretly, trains were being prepared with equipment. They burnt the archives and vanished after a few days. Archives.
Mr. Bar-Or, how do you know about the burning of the archives?
Saw them do it. The Jews were even obliged to help the SS men to carry out all their plans. The first information of the Red Cross men was that this was the first transport to be sent for extermination, and that all the constructions were discovered. The plan was to murder all the inmates of Theresienstadt. During the last month, in April, there were many transports arriving to Theresienstadt from various camps. Terrible transports.
Where did they come from?
From Bergen-Belsen. I cannot remember other camps, but many camps in a terrible condition. There was an epidemic, and the situation in Theresienstadt was before that quite good, and it became clear that the plan was really to slaughter and kill the inmates.
What conditions were good in Theresienstadt?
We came from another concentration camp. Theresienstadt was ridiculously good. 6,000 people, Jewish workers, a way of life comparatively normal, family life, culture, and inner autonomy, and of course all this was a camouflage. A lot of it was a camouflage, but in regard to the Jews themselves who had to stay in this camp was a kind of unfounded reality, in fact. But to them it was quite real, the conditions in the camp.
Judge Halevi, how did you learn that there was this plan to murder all the Jews of Theresienstadt?
The constructions were discovered, the buildings they prepared, and the Red Cross made it clear that this saved the ghetto from the SS men to slaughter all the inmates. 10 days later, the Russians took over Theresienstadt.
Judge Landau, Dr. Savatius, have you any questions? Answer,
In the
no, I have no questions of this witness.